boy, oh boy, NIO's earnings report was just released. I also listened to the earnings call. In this video, I'll be summarizing the key points from the earnings call and the earnings report. First, to quickly go through the earnings report, the big headline number, of course, net loss of $930.2 million US dollars. Pretty staggering. However, this was kind of expected. I did kind of warn you guys that, all the different stores are rent and, of course, increased marketing activities. So it was kind of expected. Gross margin was 7.6%. Total revenue was 1.658 billion US dollars. Now, of course, cash on hand at the end of March was US 3.6 billion, which kind of seems low, but you got to remember that in early April they did a dilution equity offering, which gave them 4 billion Hong Kong dollars. So this, of course, did not show up in the Q1 report because it was actually in Q2. So their cash situation is actually better than 3.6 billion. It's more than 3.6 billion. Okay, so let's go over some of the highlights of the earnings call. So just to quickly go through the current status of the stores and everything. Right now they have 184 NIO houses. These are the huge stores with a second floor, usually a second floor dedicated to NIO owners, or sometimes even Envo owners as well, and you can go there and have some fun. But these are pretty big stores. They're flagship stores, and they would typically have all the vehicle models in the stores. And then they have 461 NIO spaces. These are much smaller, usually maybe 1 to 3 cars in each NIO space, so they have more of these. 391 NIO service centers, and these are NIO operated service centers. They also have third-party service centers. 66 NIO delivery centers, and these delivery centers, of course, also do deliveries for Envo and Firefly. They also have 445 Envo stores, which is quite a lot, to be honest, okay? So they really ramped up the number of Envo stores, and that has also helped the sales increase for Envo. In terms of battery swap stations, 3,408 swap stations with 989 on highways, giving more than 75 million plus swaps. And then in the earnings call, they talked about how in Q3, the Firefly car will go to the global market, basically Europe and several other countries. They talk a bit more about that later on. So, of course, April 7th, they had that dilution where they raised 4 billion Hong Kong dollars, and it was actually oversubscribed, showing great interest. And that means that people do want to invest in NIO, which is good. All right, and they said deliveries are set to accelerate in Q3, with gross margins will keep improving. A lot of the operating efficiency improvements will start to show up in Q2, improving numbers in Q2, and then some of the Q&A stuff. So they said that over 10% increase in average selling price with the new 5566 launch, because before in April, in May, and before that they had clearance sales. So right now, 10% increase in average selling price, and also a 10% boost in margins. And then at Q4, that's when the new ES8 starts deliveries. And then by Q4, we can probably get 25K deliveries per month for the NIO brand. But more importantly, even though this doesn't seem like a huge improvement in numbers, margins will see a huge improvement, hopefully above 20% in Q4. And then improving R&D activities by merging Firefly, NIO, and Envo groups, and overall improvements in all aspects from sales to also production efficiency, etc., renegotiating supply chain costs, etc. So very, very nice. They really highlighted about NWN, NIO World Model, which has received very good positive feedback from Banyan Cars, which is the NIO 2.0 cars. Now, they still haven't released it to the newer 5566, the ones with their own NX9031 chips. That will be released later this month. So this is very, very nice. And then this, of course, Envo will actually eventually use NIO's own in-house chips down the line, but not right now. So in April, Envo sales gradually increased after management change. Envo, of course, showing that Envo has strong product competitiveness. This is also in part thanks to the number of swap stations that Envo can use, which has risen to over 1,900. And also the ratio of Envo batteries in the swap stations have also increased, also boosting sales. They are very confident in L60 regaining over 10,000 sales per month. Also, very strong positive response towards the L90 when showing at different stores. And they believe the L90 will be revolutionary, it will be a game changer, and this is exactly what they said. They actually said game changer for the large size BEV market because it's going to be very spacious, but at the same time, you can actually sit 7 people in the car and still have the a frunk for suitcases. Okay, so this is going to be pretty nice. Of course, the self-developed chips will improve costs savings by around 10,000 RMB per car. This will, of course, help Q2 margins. And in Q2, NIO margins will be around 15%. This is because, of course, the newer cars, but also we got to remember in April, May, they still had the clearance sales, of course. So it's not a huge improvement in margins. Envo will probably improve much more in terms of margins later on and not so much in Q2. So they really released a big bombshell that the new ES6 itself has over 20% margins, and the EC6 is even slightly higher than that. So the car ES6 is, of course, NIO's best seller, and you definitely want them to sell more of this with 20% margins. This is absolutely spectacular. Starting in Q2 and then going forward, Q3, Q4, this is going to be the year of the harvest for NIO, according to the CEO, because this is where they're going to, generate the most amount of sales. And then they released their shocking information that 60% of Envo buyers bought because of battery swap, which is very nice. And of course, they also talked about merging NIO and Envo in terms of back-end management and operational channels, but they are not merging sales. They also have a very cool thing that they're starting to do, which is using power swap stations as a point of sale. In terms of like lower tier cities, they might just have a swap station and then they have the cars and then the sales rep in the cars next to the swap station, and they don't actually have to have a physical store. So that's going to save them on some rent, but they're still able to, of course, showcase the product, and the swap station is right there. So they're going to do that, and that's very nice. They also talked about how there's over 10 partners or franchisees in over 15 countries, and that Envo, Firefly, and NIO's new products will gradually move into the newer markets around the world, which is very nice. Now, we got to talk about something a little bit more sensitive, and this is, of course, someone asked why the new 5566 did not move on to the 800-volt system. And the CEO's answer was because of the better customer experience with the 400-volt batteries being more available. And this kind of hints on the fact that back a while ago, one tech dude at Huawei talked about how battery swap limits your ability to innovate and go forward in terms of progression, because the available batteries in the swap stations are still stuck in the previous year's tech. And in that aspect, you kind of have to agree to a certain extent that yes, it seems like they didn't upgrade to the 800 volt for the 5566 because of the fact that you're not going to have that many batteries, the 800 volt batteries in the swap station, and not gives that much of a better customer experience. So you're making a compromise because of the fact that you have battery swap. So that's kind of counterintuitive, thinking that your battery swap is actually future-proof. And in a sense, it is future-proof, but also it limits tech development because every swap station has 400 volt batteries, if you get what I mean. So they're hesitant to move on to 800 volt, but it seems like in the future, of course, many years later, they will eventually move to the 800 volt system. But for now, that's the reason why they have not moved to the 800 volt architecture, because 400 volt batteries are more readily available. And Are people concerned about this? People aren't. All right, not many people are concerned about this because battery swap is still very fast. So it isn't that much of a huge issue, but it is a very interesting topic to talk about. All right, so take it for what it's worth. Yeah. Overall, earnings report seemed in line with my expectations. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, stay safe, stay healthy. Peace out.